I watched this video earlier today, and I thought he did a really good job. And I think I've said it in one of my last videos, and it's just an abundantly obvious thing. But we as people have our own opinions, we have our own experiences, and I do agree with the title of his video of "There Are No MacBook Killers." Like, I just hate the idea of something killer, flagship killer, iPad killer. Like, it's a different product. And I feel like the majority of what he's going to get at is just the truth of the operating system is what has kept people where they are. Now, personally, and he'll speak on it some more, and I'll talk about it a little bit more as well. I feel like I go where it actually works best for me, and then usually there's a reason for that. So before I start explaining too much, let's go ahead and listen to what he has to say.
And I got more than one comment about this, and because we're all trying to kill time before Dub, I thought I'd weigh in a little bit on my thoughts with the new Microsoft Surface products, all shipping with these new Snapdragon X Elite chips, which I have to say, I'm happy for all of you Windows fans out there. Feels like Qualcomm is actually starting to catch up a little bit, which felt inevitable, especially with this whole ARM transition clearly being objectively better for the end user, better battery life, better performance, and it took a while for Surface to get around to it, probably because Windows has to be on so many different devices. It's really hard to optimize the software for the ARM architecture when you know that much of the Windows user base is going to stick around with x86. But it took some time, it took some energy, and now, at least in these early speed tests, it's looking like the Snapdragon X Elite chip is actually coming out a little bit faster, maybe not just a little bit faster, than the M3 chip found in the MacBook Air, which was awfully convenient for them to choose. Their machines usually have active cooling systems, and the M3 MacBook Air is not really intended to be an intense powerhouse. I mean,
Yeah, and that's something that I always thought too, since we've been talking about these Snapdragon chips of, all right, you say your machines, Qualcomm, are capable of doing all these things, but then, yeah, you compare it to Apple's base device. So it was like this when the M1 chips were out, and I'll say it was like this too with the M2 chips and with the M3 as well. It's okay. The MacBook Air is this passively cooled thing for the base Pro device. You just take that exact same MacBook Air and put a fan on it. And I gotta ask, like, okay, how would any of these Qualcomm machines compare to that base model MacBook Pro that is essentially this MacBook Air, but just with a fan? It might have an additional GPU or CPU core. I really don't know. I mean, it's a minimal difference in terms of extra component internally. I'll say that. But yeah, just how do those chips compare to other devices that will also utilize fans?
people might brag about it on the website a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's a passively cooled chip. Just a heatsink, nothing actively cooling it like a fan, which is why for sustained loads, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Qualcomm can create a more efficient, faster chip with a cooling system in place, but that's probably why they didn't want to compare it too much to the M3 in the MacBook Pro series.
But the one thing I will say, and this is, again, like, I'm sure if I did the research, whether it's anybody else, you could answer that question, because I'm asking the same question, and I just haven't cared enough to actually look. So if Qualcomm is saying that their chip is 50% faster than the M3 in the MacBook Air, okay, well, let's see how the MacBook Air compares to that base model MacBook Pro, and then we should be able to draw some conclusions when it comes to comparing all three devices. I haven't seen anybody actually do it. I don't know if anybody actually cares enough to do it, but the information is probably there. And if I care, I'll do it, which I probably won't, but it's there. We just haven't done it. We're just listening to what Qualcomm says, myself included, and then we're just waiting for these devices to actually get released.
I'm willing to acknowledge that even if neck and neck we get real-world speed tests on these things and it turns out that the Snapdragon X Elite chip is actually able to outperform the M3 in regards to video export tests, 3D modeling tests, and I'm sure gaming tests are going to be fascinating. Windows inherently is just going to have way more options for gaming to choose from in the first place. But the point I really wanted to drive home here is that people are not necessarily cross-shopping these things.
Okay, now the one thing I wanted to say before he goes into the next topic is it's the issue I feel that everybody else is presenting, that these computers need to be comparatively performant to the M3 series of chips. And I still am under the notion of that just isn't true. It needs to be on the same level as the M1 chip, and then, whether it's the M1 Pro or whatever. But when Apple transitions to using their own silicon, we saw, these outrageous performance increases. But then each year it's been kind of an iterative upgrade, and yeah, they are more performant. I think with the M3, they're just feeding the chip more power, which allows clock speeds to go up or whatever. So yeah, like it's cool. But as a person who has had an M1 MacBook Air and an M2 MacBook Air, I have not purchased an M3 one. Don't really see that there's a point because, like I said, just iterative upgrades. When I was using my M1 MacBook Air, I had a Lenovo ThinkPad X13S, and that had an ARM chip in it. It was the Snapdragon 8CX Gen 3, I believe. So an ARM chip. And at this point, it's almost like we're not even going to talk about that. And we don't talk about it because that chip was so bad. Like literally, I had both machines, the M1 MacBook Air and that Qualcomm chip in that ThinkPad X13S. And I wanted to like the ThinkPad because I like the ThinkPad identity, the ThinkPad brand. I like using Windows, but the performance was just so bad. I sold it. I could not continue using that. So let's get to what he has to say here about people cross shopping. And that's, I think the next few things he's going to say are really the reasons that I'm here.
Very similar to iPhone versus Android, this really all comes down to software features at the end of the day. Because keep in mind, before Apple switched to the M series of chips with Apple Silicon and got that big boost in battery life and performance, there were still lots of people buying Macs with Intel processors. And the PC fanboys would never let us forget that Apple was choosing the worst CPUs, or why would they choose last year's Intel processors and not the newest ones? A lot of people were upset by the slow and weak battery life of Macs in the past, and yet.
So, yeah, my video is going to probably be close to half an hour long. But the point, like, he's making really, really good points, and yeah, I've seen a few of his videos, but I feel like there are two key things that he's not addressing. The first is that even though there were a lot of people who bought Macs, I mean, if we're just talking about like a sheer number, like yeah, that's a decently sized number. That number paled in comparison to the Windows market. And it's still like that, globally and even throughout the United States. I don't know exactly what those percentages are. But another thing that really catapulted Mac sales and PC sales, but, we're talking Macs here, was the pandemic. And the pandemic combined with their M series chips. I'm sure there are a lot of people that said, one, I just need a laptop. And then two, oh, I've been hearing really good things about this laptop, the M1 Air and Pro at the time, and even the Mac Mini. Let me give it a try. And here we are 4 years later, and a lot of people aren't in the position to upgrade computers, so they're still using them. But we have seen that year over year, computer sales are down. So it's not like there's just this massive influx of Mac users every year that are just constantly going over. But I will say that a lot of the people, probably, because I definitely am one of them, and hopefully I'm not speaking too much before he starts talking about it, because I probably am. I switched to the Mac because of the hardware, not the software. So I'm the exact opposite of what he said. I really cannot stand Mac OS. It's yeah. In fact, this isn't a video of me trying to rag on Mac OS, but it's just, I don't like it. Like I just flat out don't like it. I like the hardware, and because it appears that we're going to get a similar hardware experience in the realm of Windows now, I would have almost no problem getting rid of this. Like this 16-inch MacBook Pro, it's a good device. And if I could just natively run Windows on it, then I would say that, honestly, it probably doesn't matter about all these Qualcomm chips. Like, I'd be happy that they exist. And yeah, I'd dabble with them. But in terms of a full package, I am satisfied with almost all of the hardware here. So he's going to keep talking. I'm going to shut up. But like I said, I'm the exact opposite. And I know there are some, I mean, that was the whole basis of a lot of our recommendations over the course of the last 4 years, or 3.5, I should say, is that the hardware is what's changed. Mac OS is, kind of still the same. I mean, there some changes, and some of it kind of feels more like iOS now. But at the end of the day, when you would watch a YouTube review, and I'm sure if we went back to watch some of his older videos, we were talking about the hardware of Mac OS, or the Mac, we'll say, not the software. So if that hardware is good in the Windows realm, some people, myself included, will probably switch back.
People kept on buying them. There were a lot of Mac users out there, and it was not about the performance. It always came down to the ecosystem experience, the operating system, having the software, and having the design that people really appreciated.
And I really feel that, he's ignoring the huge catalyst in terms of Mac sales, which is because the hardware got good. Not Mac OS. It's because the hardware got good.
People definitely didn't like Windows' direction to try to have a hybrid touch interface with a keyboard and mouse interface, and that may have stirred some people more towards Mac. Windows also was known, at least in my circle, for having a lot of driver corruption problems and a lot.
So, again, I'm sorry that I'm stopping so frequently, but the one thing he just pointed out was that a lot of people might not have liked what Microsoft as a whole was doing when it came to the option for touchscreens, or you can have 2-in-1s, convertibles, whatever. Put your laptop in tent mode. There were a lot of people who didn't like that. There were a lot of people who did, because, again, we're using these words a lot, a bunch, whatever, and the actual numbers exist if we were to do the actual research. But I feel like, again, another thing that he's missing is that when it comes to Windows, when it comes to Android, it's truly about choice. So for somebody who doesn't like the touchscreen, like I don't, I think it's a waste to have a laptop sitting here, a trackpad or a mouse and a keyboard, and sometimes I'm even using an external keyboard, to have to then reach up and touch my screen. Like I would hate that. But I don't buy those then. So I'll just go off and buy a laptop that doesn't utilize touch. And in fact, I think I have one in that does support touch, and I forget that I do because I never use it because I don't have to. But the other Windows machines that I have don't support touch because that's not what I want. And same thing with Android, that when it comes to something, there is most likely an Android vendor that has created a device that supports whatever it is that you're looking for. When we talk about the Mac and we talk about the iPhone, it's what does Apple want you to do, and that's what you're stuck with. So again, I feel like he's looking at it through his perception, his perspective, which again is correct. It's his opinion. I just feel like he's not looking as broadly as he could.
Unconsensual software updates every morning. That made it hard to work, especially for me. I used to own a PC, and I felt like I didn't leave the PC. The PC pushed me away by being so inconsistent and unreliable, with apps opening and updates installing without my permission, and driver corruptions making it so that I literally couldn't work. I felt...
So yeah, I do agree with the updates. I mean, yeah, they did happen a lot. Now, as a person who usually closes everything that he's working on, when I'm done, like, oh, I'm done working, so let me close everything. If my computer restarts, I'm probably not even really going to notice it. Like, yeah, I'll need to log in again, and that's it. But for people who do have a lot of things open, sometimes your workflow gets completely interrupted, and now you're like, damn it, another update, I can't believe it, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I completely understand that. But yeah, like for me, it was just like, I just closed everything that I'm using, so it didn't really bother me. Driver corruption issues, fortunately, I didn't really experience too much of that. I'm sure he and I use different programs, so whatever he was using, yeah, I could see that there are some issues, like, oh, this just doesn't work properly for some reason. It's weird. But yeah, different experiences.
Like, I was forced back to Mac because of the poor performance of Windows, and the unreliability of it wasn't so much that I ever had an issue with the hardware. The hardware was usually better than the Mac. It's only in just the last couple years, particularly in the laptop space, that Apple has actually started to easily surpass Windows PCs in regards to performance and battery life. Now,
and that's that. I mean, that's the whole thing right there. I probably could have just centered my video around that statement. Is, yeah, he's acknowledging, which I'm happy that he is that it wasn't until recently that, yeah, the Apple hardware got good. But as I also mentioned, the Apple hardware got good in that year and the following years of the pandemic when people just needed to buy stuff. And it was very easy to recommend these laptops. Like, yeah, like right, I'm using an M1 Pro MacBook. I would still recommend this to somebody today, but 3 years later, or however long it's been out, like, yeah, M2's fine, M3's fine, the M4 and the iPad, which at some point that'll be put in laptops as well, fine. But the M1 series of chips was so good at the hardware level that even years later, I'm like, yeah, I would still recommend this computer right here.
Thankful that those of you who like Windows for work or for gaming or for whatever reason you prefer using Windows now have an option to access the same kind of great benefits we've gotten from the ARM architecture in our MacBooks, just now in something made by Microsoft.
And before I forget, alluding to what I was saying before, like, yeah, his video really is focused on the Microsoft Surface. Microsoft had their event. I guess it was at the beginning of this week. Yeah, I think it was either the beginning of this week or last week. I forget which one. I think it was last week. And yeah, like that's cool. There are people who are not going to like the Surface. I've owned one Surface tablet, and I didn't particularly care for it. For a bunch of reasons. Main reason is that it had a removable SSD. Great. But in order to get that SSD out, and the only reason I cared is I bought it on eBay, and the person said that the operating system wouldn't load, and I was just like, oh, I wonder if this has a slotted SSD or is it soldered on? I don't know, and I probably should have done more research, but I didn't. But I just said, you know what, it has to be removable. Like it's a tablet, but it's a full blown computer, so this drive has to be removable. But the only way to access that drive was to remove a glued on screen. And I said, this is absolutely terrible design. At that particular time, I also had a Dell tablet. I don't remember why I bought two, because I think maybe I was trying to get on board with touchscreen stuff and ended up hating it. But the Dell one was just so much more simple when it came to being able to repair it. So since then, I haven't really liked the Surface. So he is talking about the Surface, but as I was saying before, it truly is about choice. So if you don't like the Surface, then right now, I think Dell, Asus, Acer, HP, Lenovo, and I'm sure somebody else has already announced that they too are going to be releasing some of these Qualcomm laptops, these Copilot Plus PCs. So if you don't like what Microsoft is offering, then you are more than free to go off and find something else, because you will have choices. And as a person who does like Dell laptops, I'm happy that Dell is releasing an XPS with this. The Latitude, I would also probably, with the Latitude, I'd get on board. With the Inspiron, not so much. I saw the Lenovo ThinkPad T14S and the Lenovo Yoga Slim 7i, I think is what it was. Looked like good machines. So choices. The Acer one, the HP. I'm not a fan of HP, so I'm not going to buy one. But it's all about choice. And for those of us who just don't like Apple, or if you don't like something about Apple, but you like something else about Apple, then it's like, well, I got to take the good and the bad, because I like this hardware, but I hate the software experience. Kind of sucks. Now, the other thing, and before I forget, because I'm going on and on here, what's different today in 2024 compared to, I'll say, even like 2018, like before, I don't want to say 2020 because that was close, and even though, the catalyst in terms of Mac sales, but the difference between now and a decade ago, information is more readily available. All right. So for the people who have been stuck in the Apple ecosystem, like right now, yes, I know the iPhone adoption is at an all-time high, blah 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 blah, and yeah, I feel like people are stuck because of iMessage. And he did a little skit at the beginning of his video talking about, oh, does your computer have iMessage, blah 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 blah, but because of the amount of information that's available to you, and because you have choice, and because fortunately it looks like the iPhone's going to be adopting RCS, I feel like, and because with these Qualcomm chips, there is going to be a lot of interoperability in terms of some of those Apple exclusive features. if you are using an Android device, because now the chip in your Android device will be made by the same company that makes the chip in your laptop. So a lot of that stuff is probably just going to be copied. I mean, at this point, it's like, yeah, we did the exact same thing. So I feel like there are going to be a lot of people who realize, well, wait a minute, I can do the exact, like almost the exact same thing over here. Yeah. And, pricing is what it is. I'm not going to try to speculate on all the different price points, but with Android, you do get a wide range of price options. With Microsoft, in terms of computers, you usually get a wide range of options. With these Copilot Plus ones, yeah, I think they're all starting at no less than $1,000, but, prices will come down, blah, 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 blah. But it's all about information, choice, and interoperability that will now be more cohesive on the Microsoft Android side compared to the way that it is now just on the all Apple side.
Put up with the exact same price gouging that Apple did, like $350 keyboards, or only allowing certain chips on certain colors of machine. It's funny, Apple gets all this flack when they do that kind of crap, and then Microsoft does it and everyone goes, well, I guess Apple did it first, so it's okay. Yeah, no.
Yeah, that pisses me off too. When any company does that, it's like, oh, I want this color. Well, yeah, you got to pay more for it because now that color is only exclusive to this configuration of laptop. So it's just like, thanks.
I'm not trying to say it's okay by any means, but it's just a very similar kind of pricing strategies. And I've seen far too many people consider this Elite chip to be considered a MacBook competitor, probably because it was directly brought up in the event itself when they announced it. But again, this all is coming back to software. I don't think these are MacBook killers, even if they perform twice as fast as the M3 or M4 chip, regardless of the cooling systems in place, because at the end of the day, people chose MacBooks because they wanted Mac OS. They wanted some software that was available on Mac OS that wasn't available on Windows, or they like that consistency of the experience. They like the way it seamlessly integrates with their iPhone.
And again, I know I've already said it, and I probably could have waited until now to say it, but I just didn't want to forget that while, yes, there... Ice cream truck. While there were plenty of people in the past who had Macs, MacBooks, MacBook Pros, the, iMac, whatever. Yeah, and they did like it for the software. But I hopefully I'll spend some time actually looking at a graph. I mean, I feel like I've seen operating system adoption rates like in a YouTube video. But 2020 changed a lot of stuff. And it was, just literally everybody, myself included, was like, this hardware is so good. and that was it. Apple made the MacBooks thicker. The battery life was great. The screens were really good. And I think the screens have always been good, but really just battery life, performance, and minimal fan noise. All of that is at the hardware level. You tweak fan speed at software level, whatever. But in terms of the actual physical experience right here, this is all hardware. So personally, and I know it's just anecdotal, the same way he's expressing his opinions on it, I, as I said already, only came to the Mac for hardware. I tried to do video editing on my Windows machine, and no thanks. Fan noise was just too problematic. Battery life sucked. Right now, like as I'm using OBS to record this video while watching this YouTube video, I'm doing it unplugged, and I almost never worry about, oh my God, is my MacBook going to die? Because usually the only time I'm charging it is when I'm actually connected to my dock. But that is great, and I always want to give Apple kudos for that. But in terms of a software experience, as a person who doesn't use an iPhone, even though in this country I know, whatever the Android adoption rate is, I don't like it. So I am a person that is just like, man, I am happy that Qualcomm is doing this. And even if these chips are only as good as the M1 chips, I'm probably going to buy one and just move on with my life and sell this stuff. Because yeah, it's the hardware is what I liked. And back in 2020, yeah, I'm sure if we pulled up the numbers, it was people bought laptops because they needed them, and then people bought MacBooks because reviewers, creators, I'm kind of half and half of that stuff, had to recommend them. I got a M1 Mac Mini for my mom. My roommate has a 14-inch MacBook Pro now. and I'm sure I've talked to other people. Oh yeah, my neighbor. I've ended up giving her a 14-inch MacBook Pro. I got another friend out in somewhere else, and she has an M1 MacBook now. Like so, yeah, like it was so easy to just recommend the hardware.
iMessage, you've got continuity camera, you've got AirDrop, you have handoff, so many things.
And all of those things that I just mentioned, there should be similar experiences coming to the Windows slash Android ecosystem because again, it'll be Qualcomm here, Qualcomm there, and then whatever software Microsoft decides to write on top of that as well. So the experience should be pretty good, and I'm looking forward to that. I really, really am.
Just seamlessly merge with Mac OS and iOS. It's really, really hard to beat that. Even though, yes, a lot of similar features are available on Windows, they usually take more setting up, more proactive features because Microsoft sadly got out of the smartphone business, even though I thought the Windows phones were pretty cool. So
Yeah, and I think the Windows phones were pretty good as well. I never actually no, I did have one Windows phone. I had a Lumia, whatever. But the one thing I wanted to include, and again, this is all opinion based, and yeah, this video is almost 30 minutes long, and I'll probably do minimal editing. um, my opinion is that Apple knows that their software really isn't that good. I mean, it's fine, but it's not great. And I also feel like if we were to go back in time, the amount of time that they spent on their like the keynote talking about the Mac in comparison to the amount of time they spend on the keynote now talking about these newer Macs, I feel like it was less. I mean, I could be wrong. My memory, of course, isn't perfect and great. But I just feel like with these new Apple Silicon Macs, they're like, oh man, the hardware's good. But the software stayed the same. So there really hasn't been much improvement on that end, the software end, in my opinion. And I feel the same way with the iPhone, that the iPhone really isn't that good. However, iMessage, and then all of the continuity stuff that he just said, for those who do have Macs and iPhones, they all work seamless together. For those who do have iPhones and iPads, the Apple Watch, yeah, it's a nice watch. I made a whole video talking about my OnePlus Watch 2 here, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a far superior device. But, they don't have the same way that Apple does. So I agree with the fact that things right now aren't as seamless, but at the same time, I feel like things will get better, and all of the things that people tout about the Apple experience will be easily replicated in the non-Apple world.
download a bunch of Microsoft apps and sign into those on Android to try to emulate the experience that is seamless, that doesn't require more apps on the iPhone and the Mac. So I definitely wouldn't consider them MacBook killers by any means. I just see it as catching up with the rest of the industry, because it seems like in at least the Mac space, we've kind of moved on from x86. We're ready to go all in on ARM, and Microsoft is finally taking ARM a little bit more seriously than they have in the past, but also doubling down on AI features, which I'm sure Apple will too. They've got a lot of neural cores to brag about, but Microsoft seems very proud of this whole recall feature that's basically constantly taking screenshots of whatever you're doing so that you can kind of have a more real-time version of the time machine feature. It'd be really funny if all the Apple people complaining about this feature that Microsoft is showcasing because they're worried about privacy. Like, I don't want Windows watching everything I'm doing at any time. Now watch Apple do the exact same thing, and they'll all go, oh, okay, well, it's Apple, so it's private and secure. We don't.
So I honestly don't care about recall. In fact, I hope that whenever I do get my Copilot Plus PC, you can just turn it off. Now, the one thing, or one of the things that I noticed, and I saw the screen, and if I look for it, I'll find it. It's how much space you can expect that feature to consume on your device. Like, we're talking, tens or hundreds of gigabytes. In terms of space that this recall feature, after it takes its screenshots, it needs to store them somewhere. So over time, it'll just slowly accumulate. And of course, you should be able to delete stuff and whatever. But something like that can be used on a device where the cost of storage isn't astronomical, and also when that storage can be upgraded by the user. If Apple implemented something like that, 256 gigabytes of baseline storage on a Mac would not be enough, because that feature would eat up probably half of it in a considerable amount of time. So And then also, I'd be worried that Apple wouldn't let you turn it off. Like, yeah, because it's, hey, we think this is the best thing for you, so it's now on. And can I turn it off? I mean, yeah, there are a lot of settings in Mac OS, so maybe you could. And I'm half joking, but also half feeling like, yeah, there are things that they do, and you're just like, that doesn't make any sense. Why can't I not do that? And they're like, well, because that's what we want you to do, or the opposite of why can't I do that? Because we don't want you to do it. so, uh, so yeah, we'll see.
Sure, if they're gonna like revamp Time Machine in some way like that, but it should help people stay on top of like, where did I leave that file, or where did I make a mistake? Let's activate the Omega 13, rewind time a little bit. If you got that joke, I'm hearting your comment. But just enough to correct a crucial mistake, and then you can go about your workday, which is probably common in the workplace where Windows is probably most often used. So there's cool features like that, and I'm happy for the silicon, but can I just say, and this is a little bit of my Apple sheep showing here, but everybody was hyping up these new Surface laptops and Surface Pro's designs. I was just not feeling it. I don't.
And again, I agree. I don't really care for the Surface either. I mean, it looks fine. I'd pay $700 to $800 for that. Yeah, I'm not going to pay $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 for it. But yeah, it's okay. But as I was saying earlier, you have choice. So I don't want a Surface, so I'm not going to get one. But from one of the other vendors, I have choices even within the vendors that they're offering multiple products themselves. So yes, you don't like the Surface. Cool. Go find something else. If you, for some reason, like either the hardware, or let's say you like Mac OS software, but you didn't like the hardware, it's like, well, they're the only place you can get the software, so it kind of sucks. So yeah, I don't like the Surface either. But I'm gonna go find something else.
Like, the trackpad not taking up as much space as possible. I don't know. As a MacBook user, I appreciate, like, the massive trackpad. Also, I appreciate that the displays are curved on the inside, but the asymmetrical bezels all the way around, I don't know. Not my thing. Maybe I'm the notch guy, so I just prefer my MacBook Pro having one size bezel all the way across the top and the sides. And seeing that asymmetricality just threw me off a little bit. I wanted to just push the display all the way to the top. Also, I know most of those little dots are useless. In fact, some of them are not even holes, but I like having the little speaker grills on the side of the keyboard, and that wasn't present on the Surface laptops either. Plus,
And I'm happy you mentioned the speakers. I mean, yeah, I too, like, I know I'm looking at them right now, and you can't really see where the speaker is. I mean, if I look harder, maybe if I shine some more light in it, I'd see it. But one thing that Apple really has working for it, and this is just going back to the core of what I'm saying, is that the hardware is good. In addition to the chips, is the thermal, the Apple Silicon, the speakers on this 16-inch MacBook Pro are probably the best laptop speakers I've ever used. So when it comes to this overall experience, I am enjoying the trackpad. I am enjoying the keyboard. I am enjoying the battery life. I am enjoying Apple Silicon. I am enjoying minimal fan noise. I'm enjoying the screen. I'm enjoying the webcam. I'm enjoying the efficiency. I'm enjoying the power. I'm enjoying everything except for Mac OS itself. So if there is a Windows machine that offers a similar hardware experience, which I'm hopeful that there is, based off of all of the choices that we will have, for me it will be such a no-brainer to drop this operating system that I hate and move on over, or move back on over, to a Windows machine. Now, if by some chance, and I think this really will, because we got WWDC coming up, this would really be a strong caveat. Now that I'm over 30 minutes into this, I'm sure nobody's going to watch this whole video, but I've said it before, and maybe I'll say it again in another video in the future, before next week, that if Apple for some reason decides to, I guess, I'll just say turn it on, turn Boot Camp back on, and then you can just natively boot Windows, that will be a sign of them saying, oh shit, yes, the hardware for the Mac has been good, but that won't be enough to keep people, because the hardware for the competition has now caught up. So let's hope that we can encourage people to say, hey, our Apple Silicon and the Mac at the hardware level is still as good and sometimes better than the competition. But if you want to run Windows, fine, Boot Camp. I know there's Parallels and VMware Fusion and I think UTM or something. So you have your options, but to run it natively without having to go through a hypervisor like that. Because however Boot Camp actually works, I guess it's just a boot manager, and then it says, hey, which one do you want to use? I was tempted to just run a hypervisor using, I guess it was UTM, I think is what it was called, on my MacBook Air, because I just wanted to use Windows, and I just had it running, using it as if it were running natively on it. And yeah, the Mac just got so hot, and I said, I can't do this. I can't just run two operating systems all the time. So yeah, if Apple come next week says we're bringing back Boot Camp, I'm gonna be like, that's another sign that they aren't confident in what they have. And another sign, which I've said in other videos and I hinted at it here, kind of is like, yeah, iMessage, there's nothing special about it, but it works amongst all Apple devices. But that is a way of locking. And I feel like, and so does Elon Musk, if you care about what he has to say, that if a company chooses to erect some type of walled garden around their products, around their services, that's the inferior product, because they know that, wait a minute, I can look over there and I can get a similar or better experience. Why would I not go over there? Apple doesn't want you looking outside of their garden. They just want you to look only at their products. So all that just to say, if Apple brings back Boot Camp for Apple Silicon Macs, that'll be a clear sign that they are not confident in their products. But then again, if they don't bring it back, that's just them being a bunch of dicks.
I am immediately annoyed by any company that tries to keep the USB-A port around. It's a horrible port. It's symmetrical, but it's not reversible. We've wasted so much time with USB-A, so I've been all in favor of getting rid of it on as many devices as possible, as soon as possible, and yet they're still keeping it around here. I get the argument, but some people still have USB-A. Yeah, they only have USB-A because you're letting them. Just stop it. Move.
So yeah, I get the rant. And yeah, as these Apple Silicon Macs don't have USB-A, and he'll say that the desktops do. I only have a couple of devices that still rely on USB-A, but if the machine has room for it, cool. But at the same time, if it only has room for it because you made room for it, and the laptop could have been thinner, then yeah, include a dongle in the box for those who actually need it. People will have dongles and other things to help for conversion. Like I said, I normally have this connected to a dock. That dock has USB-A ports on it, so if I need them, and I'm in there. But then I also have a little dongle, so I have that. So I get his frustration.
To Type-C, the EU, where are you? Back me up on this. Can we just outright ban the USB-A ports? I don't care if it costs like 2 cents less than USB-C ports in China to use. I'm sick of using USB-A, and any laptop that encourages the use of it or allows the use of it, I'm fed up with and sick of. Looking at you too, Apple. I see you putting USB-A on Mac Studios. At least those are desktops, though. That's a little bit better, but yeah, I still think I would choose a MacBook at the end of the day, regardless if Microsoft is able to come up with an elite chip that's able to outperform M3 Max or M4 Max or whatever silicon is around, because MacBook Pro's got amazing speaker systems on board. It's got amazing microphones. Webcam is not bad either, and the continuity camera feature for a content creator is just like priceless.
Yeah, I could not agree more, and I mentioned all those things earlier, that it's truly a total package. Why aren't the Windows vendors also making total package machines? I don't know. And that potentially could be a limitation in terms of people switching back or people staying or whatever. But yeah, like everything that I mentioned, everything he mentioned, yeah, this machine is a total package.
Of just opening up the phone and using it as a webcam, and the display on your phone turns off. Super duper handy, very useful, and I'm past the point where performance gains really have that much of a net impact. My limiting factor when it comes to content production usually comes down to how fast can I upload things. When most of your videos only take a minute or two to export, then that means the most you can possibly save by switching to a laptop with a faster chip is about a minute, and that's just going to be thousands and thousands of extra dollars. And I especially, of all people, do not have any interest in switching ecosystems. There's a bunch of apps that are not going to transfer over, like Final Cut, and having to relearn video editing on a different platform, not having that in-house design software and hardware optimization that Apple provides, because
Yeah, I mean, I get that point as well. I mean, I agree with, I guess, the frustration that will come if you wanted to learn a new video editing software, or just new software in general, something that wasn't available on another platform. But I also feel like that too is another form of lock-in and another disservice to the customer, that if you want to use Final Cut, then you have to buy a Mac, or back when people were making Hackintoshes. And I'm sure, yeah, there are other platform-specific softwares that I'm just not thinking about right now. But yeah, like that's just another form of lock-in. So I would hate to recommend to somebody like, oh, well, I know, or at least I feel that this Windows computer over here now is better. And you, as an individual, probably, you might, like, if you like Windows more, but you've been using Final Cut. So now you have to stick with the Mac. Like, I would hate to say that to somebody. In fact, I wouldn't say that. I'd say, if that's the only thing keeping you, you need to switch. Learn DaVinci Resolve or whatever other options there are out there, but don't stick with an entire ecosystem because of one or two software programs. Software programs? Pieces of software. Applications. One or two applications.
Make their own software editing service that allows it to export faster, and usually the video editing is more efficient, so the battery life is better. Yeah, I just don't see a lot of MacBook users out there switching to the Surface products simply because of a chip upgrade.
And again, his view, the way that he's looking at it, and he acknowledges the fact that he's an Apple sheep. I'm not calling him that. He said it in this video, but he name dropped specifically the Surface. It's all about choice, my friend. If you don't like the Surface, you can look someplace else. And yeah, we are probably close to an hour. As I've said before, that huge uptick of Mac OS users happened in a once-in-a-lifetime worldwide pandemic where everybody started working from home, or at least a lot of people did. A lot of people realized that the computers that they had weren't sufficient when it came to whatever they were doing at home. And Apple just happened to make this huge transition to an extremely more efficient chip. 4 years later, we will now see exactly if those users stay, or do we reach some type of stalemate. But as I said an hour ago, I am going back. And unless I guess the only way that I would stay, which I probably won't, but I was going to say the only way I would stay is if none of the other machines offer like great total packages. But then I'm like, well, the screens we're seeing are going to be good. Trackpads are fine. It's really just the speakers. I mean, because I do watch video, but at the same time, I'm like, I have, my phone, I have headphones, I have other ways to consume audio that if my laptop speakers aren't great, I think I'll be okay. So just a couple weeks away, and then months away, for the rest of the year. We'll see as these manufacturers start releasing their devices.
Like I said, in the old days, they were faster anyway, and that didn't sway that many people in the first place. But am I wrong? Are any of you guys out there
And I'd say one more thing, too, that's very important, which, like he said, the old days, back then, information wasn't what it is, but back then, everybody wasn't trying to be some type of content creator. YouTube and other platforms ushered in a wave of people now needing hardware. And even though back then, and he said, oh, the Macs were slower, yeah, for people who like Mac OS, cool, but there were a lot of people who just weren't using computers for those types of things. But now that there are, and now that information can be shared the way that it is, I feel like we might see like, oh crap, hey, let's give that a try. The reviewers start saying, hey man, these laptops are good. Like, don't go out and buy one today. However, for your next computer, definitely consider one of these. If you need one right now, definitely consider one of these. So we'll see.
Now, in switching to a Surface product from the Mac, feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting the channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you all in the next one.
See, and he called himself an Apple sheep, and you're welcome. I've watched this video twice now, and we'll see. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the new machines, and I'm also looking forward to no longer having to use this MacBook, because I do like the hardware, but contrary to what he's saying, I don't like the software. So I am free to move on to another product.